I'm Grace, 32 years old. 10 days ago, I woke up from a 9-hour spinal surgery, and the first thing I saw was 73 missed calls. My vision was still blurry from the anesthesia, a thick gray fog clinging to my brain while the steady beep of the hospital monitors counted out the rhythm of my heartbeat. Every breath felt like inhaling glass, and my back was a landscape of raw, throbbing agony. But the red notification bubble on my phone screen hurt more. I struggled to hold the device. My fingers numb and clumsy, I bypassed the texts and went straight to the first voicemail from my father. His voice was calm, almost cheerful, as if he were calling to tell me he'd found a good deal on groceries instead of what he had actually done. He said, "Grace, honey, we had a family meeting. We sold your luxury waterfront penthouse to pay for Brooke's wedding. You were unconscious, and we needed to move fast on a cash offer, so we signed for you. You'll understand. Brooke deserves her dream day." $2,800,000 gone in an instant. My home, my only sanctuary, my entire future stripped away while surgeons were literally cutting into my spine. My sister's elite Miami wedding was only 3 weeks away, and my parents had decided that my entire life was a fair price to pay for her aesthetic. I could barely walk. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, distant and unresponsive. But lying in that recovery room, staring at the sterile white ceiling, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just made one phone call. What happened at that wedding? No one could have expected it. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you? I didn't cry. Tears are a luxury for people who still have something to lose. And right now, I was looking at a balance sheet that had been zeroed out while I was unconscious. I didn't ask why. Asking why implies there is a rational explanation for a felony, and I was done searching for logic in their greed. I opened the family group chat. There it was, a screenshot of the closing documents for my penthouse. My father had posted it with a thumbs up emoji. Brooke had hearted the message only seconds later. No shame, no hesitation, just a digital celebration of the moment they stripped me of my future to fund her 3-week countdown to elite status. For years, I had been the silent investor in their version of a family. I was the one who absorbed the impact, the one who buffered their bad decisions with my hard-earned stability. It was an invisible chain. I had lived in a prison without bars, conditioned to believe that my worth was tied to how much I could endure for them. I was the survivor who had perfected the art of the fawn response, smiling while they bled me dry because it was safer than the alternative. But that chain didn't just stretch, it snapped the second that voicemail ended. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. I didn't answer a single message. I didn't give them the satisfaction of my indignation. Instead, I pulled my laptop onto my lap, the screen's glow, a harsh contrast to the dim, sterile recovery room. My back screamed with every adjustment, but my mind was a high-frequency blade. I dialed Marcus Smith, my real estate attorney. His voice was a calm anchor. "Grace, you should be resting." "Marcus," I said, and my voice was steadier than my pulse. "My parents just sold my penthouse. They forged a power of attorney while I was on the table. I need you to freeze the escrow account immediately and secure every piece of evidence regarding that transfer. I want the notary's name, the buyer's details, and the digital footprint of every signature." Marcus went silent for exactly 3 seconds. "Grace, that's a criminal offense." "It's a business transaction that lacked my consent," I corrected him, keeping my language as transactional as a tax audit. "I'm done being a subscription they think is free. Treat this like a hostile takeover. I want them to think they succeeded. I want them to spend every cent of that deposit in their minds before I pull the floor out from under them." I hit end. My compassion had been a luxury they'd overdrafted for years, and today, the line of credit was officially closed. I went back to my spreadsheet, clicking through the numbers with lethal precision. Inside, a cold, sharp clarity began to settle, replacing the warmth of familial love with the precision of a business plan. I needed an audit. To understand why I was acting with such lethal precision now, you have to understand the secret I had been carrying since 2021. My parents live in a sprawling estate in Coral Gables, a place of white stone and lush bougainvillea that they treat like a royal palace. They act as if they are the masters of that domain, the rightful heirs to a lifestyle they never earned. But 4 years ago, The facade almost crumbled. I received a frantic call from an old contact at their bank. They were 60 days away from total foreclosure. I had a choice then. I could let them face the cold reality of 30 years of financial recklessness, or I could become their invisible safety net. I chose the latter, but I did it on my terms. I didn't just hand them a check. I bought the debt through an anonymous limited liability company. I purchased the very roof over their heads without them ever knowing the daughter they dismissed was their new landlord. For 4 years, I have been the silent investor in their version of family. They signed a lease with a faceless entity, never suspecting that the reliable disappointment they treated like a backup plan was the only reason they weren't on the street. Every month, their rent check went into my account. Every month, I watched them use my stability as a stage for their arrogance. I wasn't doing it for gratitude. I was doing it because back then, my compassion was a luxury they still had access to. It went beyond the mortgage. I covered $65,000 in their hidden debts, the credit cards they maxed out, and the loans they defaulted on while trying to look wealthy for Brooke's influencer friends. I paid the property taxes they ignored. I was the one who kept the pool blue and the bougainvillea trimmed. They lived like royalty in my property while treating me like a burden. I was the foundation they were standing on, and they were too busy admiring the view to notice the cracks I was filling. While I was calculating how to keep their estate out of the bank's hands, they were obsessing over Brooke's $250,000 wedding. They were so focused on her dream day and her aesthetic that they never bothered to notice my reality. My parents didn't realize they had been living on a subscription that I had been footing the bill for. They thought they were the masters of their world, but they were just tenants in my mercy. Now, looking at the forged documents for my penthouse, I realized that the term of their occupancy was about to change. This wasn't a family home anymore. It was a bad asset. And as of today, I was ready to liquidate. The rehearsal dinner was held at a $250,000 luxury venue overlooking the ocean in Key Biscayne. The air smelled of expensive lilies and salty Atlantic breeze, a setting designed to broadcast a wealth that didn't belong to the people hosting it. I arrived late. The rhythmic tap-tap of my cane on the marble floors acting as a metronome for the room's sudden silence. I wasn't there to celebrate, I was there to audit the scene of the crime. My mother, Stephanie, intercepted me before I could reach the table. She didn't ask if I could feel my toes yet or if the incision on my spine was healing. She didn't even look at the cane. She leaned in, her perfume cloying and sweet, and whispered, "Grace, you need to stop this cold act. You are being incredibly selfish about the penthouse." I looked at her, my expression as flat as a canceled check. "Selfish?" "Yes," she hissed, her smile frozen for the benefit of the surrounding elite. $2,800,000 is just a number on a page to you, but for Brooke, it's her future. Family reputation is at stake here. Trevor's family owns banks, Grace. We cannot look like we can't afford our own daughter's wedding. You have your career. You'll make it back. Stop trying to ruin this for everyone." I didn't argue. I didn't point out the felony she had committed. I simply realized that in her mind, my life's work was just an interest-free loan for her favorite child's vanity project. My compassion had been a luxury they'd overdrafted for the last time. Then came Brooke. She looked like a curated dream in a dress that cost more than most people's cars, but when she saw me, her lips curled in a sneer that her followers never saw. She didn't ask about my surgery. She pointed a manicured finger at my cane. "Grace, you have to mask that thing for the photos," she demanded, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It's ruining the aesthetic of the bridal party. I need the shots to be clean and high fashion. If you can't stand without it, then just stay seated in the back during the procession. I won't have your condition cluttering up my gallery." The audacity wasn't just loud, it was structural. They weren't even hiding the fact that I was a secondary character in their narrative, a prop to be moved or discarded based on the lighting. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon regret for what I was about to do. But there was only clarity. This wasn't a family gathering. It was a hostile environment, and I was the only one in the room who knew the lease was up. I looked at Brooke, then at my mother. I didn't say a word. I just went back to my mental spreadsheet, checking off the names of everyone who had just authorized their own eviction. Inside, my mind glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and the quiet, lethal precision of a boundary finally drawn. After the hollow theater of the rehearsal dinner, I didn't go home to rest. I met Marcus Smith at his office in downtown Miami, the city skyline glowing outside the window like a grid of unpaid debts. My back was still a landscape of fire, the incision pulling with every breath, but my mind was a cold, calculating machine. We didn't waste time on pleasantries. Marcus laid out the forged power of attorney on the mahogany desk. I looked at my signature. It was a clumsy, desperate lie. It looked like a child's imitation of a life they hadn't earned. The notary stamp was from a man in Nevada who had already been flagged for rubber stamping fraudulent transfers. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a criminal enterprise coordinated while I was under anesthesia. I didn't feel shock. I felt the quiet, cold clarity of a balance sheet being settled. The Penthouse sale is finalized, Grace, Marcus said, his voice as clinical as my own. The full proceeds from the sale were wired into an account controlled by your father the morning of your surgery. He thinks he's a genius. I said, leaning my weight onto my cane. He thinks he's finally cashed in on the daughter he spent 32 years dismissing. I opened the folder containing the deed to the Coral Gables estate, my house. I had been the silent investor in their lifestyle for 4 years, footing the bill for their arrogance while they treated me like an afterthought. I checked the terms of the lease they had signed with my anonymous limited liability company. The expiration date was set for the exact night of Brooke's wedding. Draft the termination of tenancy. I instructed Marcus, my tone as transactional as a mortgage audit. I want the notice served during the wedding reception. They want a dream day? I'm going to give them a wake-up call that costs exactly what they stole. The move-out date will be 30 days from the service, Marcus noted, typing the commands into his system. Good, I said. By then, the $2,800,000 will be frozen, and they'll realize the roof over their heads was never their own. This isn't revenge. It's accounting. I watched the printer hum to life, the legal documents sliding out like the first volleys in a war they didn't know they were fighting. They weren't shocked by what they'd done to me. They were just comfortable because I had always played along. They thought my compassion was an infinite resource, a luxury they could overdraft whenever Brooke needed a new aesthetic. They were wrong. Inside, there was no more heat, only the steady, rhythmic pulse of a trap being set. I wasn't the daughter they could sign for anymore. I was the landlord who was about to close the account. I didn't need an apology. I needed a clean break. Calm, factual, lethal. Marcus called me 48 hours before the ceremony. The rhythmic tapping of his pen against the receiver sounded like a countdown. Grace, I dug deeper into Brooke's financial records, he said, his voice dropping an octave. The $2,800,000 from your penthouse wasn't just for a lavish wedding. It was a bailout. I sat in the dark of my temporary rental, my back propped up by orthopedic pillows, and felt the final thread of familial loyalty dissolve. A bailout for what? Your sister didn't just spend money she didn't have. She committed $200,000 in credit card fraud, Marcus revealed. She opened accounts in your parents' names, maxed them out, and was facing a criminal investigation before she met Trevor. She coached your parents on the forgery of your penthouse documents specifically to cover her tracks before her wealthy fiancé's lawyers did their due diligence. The parents I had saved from homelessness were active criminal co-conspirators in a financial felony against me. They weren't just ungrateful, they were predatory. They had chosen to destroy my life to protect a daughter who was already a fraud. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. I thought about the way my mother looked at the rehearsal dinner, the way she carried herself with such unearned authority. I realized then that their power was nothing but an illusion. They suffered from the empty wallet power illusion. Their arrogance was rented with my money. The social status they wielded like a weapon in the Coral Gables elite was a costume they'd bought with my property taxes and my mortgage payments. They believed they were inherently superior, but they were just tenants in a lifestyle I had funded. There is a difference between having wealth and being someone of character. My parents had the former only because I provided it, and they had none of the latter. When I cut the financial cord, they wouldn't just be poor, they would be invisible. Is the eviction notice ready? I asked, my voice cold and clinical. It's in my briefcase, Marcus replied. We served them at the height of the reception. Perfect, I said. The golden child was a felon, and the reliable daughter was the one holding the keys to their prison. This wasn't a family drama anymore. It was a liquidation of a bankrupt moral estate. I wasn't just reclaiming my money. I was reclaiming my name. Inside, My mind was a landscape of facts and numbers, and for the first time in 32 years, the balance was finally shifting in my favor. Calm, factual, lethal. The reception tent was a masterpiece of glass and light, a shimmering structure in Key Biscayne designed to project an image of purity that didn't exist. The air was thick with the scent of 5,000 white roses and the quiet hum of 200 elite guests, including Trevor's family, the banking titans of Miami, who were looking for a legacy to merge with. I sat at the back, my cane resting against the ivory linen, watching the theater of unearned pride. Gregory stood up at the elevated head table, his tuxedo sharp and his chest puffed out like he was the architect of Brooke's success instead of a thief who had forged his own daughter's name while she was on an operating table. He raised a glass of vintage champagne and began a toast about family sacrifice and the unbreakable bonds of unity. He called Brooke the light of their lives and thanked everyone who had contributed to making this $250,000 dream a reality. I didn't wait for an invitation. I stood up, the rhythmic tap-tap of my cane against the polished floor sounding like a ticking clock counting down to a detonation. The room went quiet as I approached the platform. I reached out and took the microphone from my father's hand. His smile froze, a mask of terror beginning to crack as he saw the clinical clarity in my eyes. "Thank you, Dad," I said, and my voice was as steady as a legal decree. "You're right. I have contributed quite a lot to this wedding. The stolen deed to my home, to be exact." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. I didn't give it room to grow. I looked directly at Trevor's parents and laid out the facts with lethal precision. I told them about the 9-hour spinal surgery I had undergone barely 3 weeks ago. I told them how, while I was unconscious, my parents had forged my signature on a fraudulent power of attorney to liquidate my waterfront penthouse. Then I turned to Brooke, whose face had gone a ghostly shade of white. I didn't stop at the penthouse. I revealed the truth that the theft wasn't just for a wedding, but a bailout for the $200,000 in credit card fraud she had committed in our parents' names. I watched Trevor's banking family turn to stone as they realized they were marrying into a financial felony. Finally, I looked at my mother and father. I asked them if they knew who really owned the Coral Gables estate they called home. I revealed that I was the anonymous investor who had saved them from foreclosure in 2021. I had been their landlord for 4 years, footing the bill for a lifestyle they used to belittle me. I pulled a manila envelope from my clutch and handed it to my mother. "This is my wedding gift," I said quietly. "It's a 30-day notice to vacate. Your lease expires at midnight." "This isn't revenge, it's accounting." I said, "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad." I walked off the platform in a silence so thick it felt like a grave. They weren't shocked by what they'd done. They were shocked that I had finally stopped playing along. Inside, the long overdue audit of my life was finally complete. The weight of their expectations had vanished, leaving only the quiet peace of a balanced ledger. The fallout was absolute. Within 48 hours, Trevor's family had filed for an annulment on the grounds of fraud. Gregory was placed on indefinite administrative leave pending an ethics review at his firm. Stephanie found her social calendar empty as the Coral Gables elite scrubbed her name from their committees. My family didn't just lose their money, they lost their masks. I didn't stay to watch them pack. I directed Marcus to finalize the sale of the Coral Gables estate. I moved into a smaller, quiet home, one that was fully mine, earned by my own sweat and protected by my own boundaries. The remaining capital from the estate sale became the seed for something new. I founded the Sowers Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping women escape the cycles of financial and emotional abuse within their own families. Setting boundaries isn't revenge, it's self-respect. Blood doesn't give anyone a license to destroy you, and you are not required to light yourself on fire just to keep people warm who wouldn't even offer you a blanket. I sleep in silence now, and for the first time in 32 years, my heartbeat isn't a countdown, it's a rhythm. If this story resonated with you, please share it. There is someone out there who needs to know that they are allowed to say no. Like and subscribe for more stories where justice is finally served. Take care of yourselves. You matter.